Good afternoon. Let's go straight away to this afternoon's panel. And as you remember, and as we did in all the thematic sessions, and it worked very, very well, we always had one thematic expert that at the end of the 2 days or 3 days of work gave us his or her impressions from observing the whole work of the 3 days. And since it was really very good support for both co-facilitators and yourselves. It was always, they always came with very interesting approaches and conclusions. We decided to do it again for this Puerto Vallarta session. So today we are going to have 2 thematic experts, and I will start with Kathleen Newland, who is co-founder of Migration Policy Institute in the US, who is going to give us her views of these 3 last days. Kathleen, you have the floor. Thank you so much for doing this for us. You have the floor.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back in Puerto Vallarta, 7 years after the 4th Global Forum on Migration and Development, and to once again enjoy the hospitality of the government of Mexico. I'd like to thank the co-facilitators and the Secretary General of this conference, Mrs. Louise Arbour, for inviting me to share some thoughts and observations at the end of this very productive 3 days. I've listened closely to the discussions here. I've taken 48 pages of notes in my rather small handwriting. So it's been a very substantive and forward-looking meeting. I've heard much convergence around concepts and some inconsistencies, often from the same speakers. For example, many have said that the Global Compact must be comprehensive and cover all aspects of migration, while also insisting that the Compact should be closely aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in which migration has, frankly, quite a limited place. But having followed international discussions of global migration for some 20 years, I've also been struck by how the discussion has changed. It's grown much more sophisticated and much less confrontational. The connection between migration and development is better understood, that development can address some of the drivers of migration, but cannot be understood as an instrument to suppress migration. There's an appreciation that migration is not a problem to be solved, but a normal and productive part of human life. There also seems to be a growing trend to talk about mobility as well as, or even instead of, migration. I'm not sure the difference is well understood, but it is important. Migration is an act. It's something that people do. Mobility is an attribute. It's something that people have, the capacity to choose where to be. In the conception of the philosopher-economist Amartya Sen, his conception of development as freedom, his conception is of development as freedom, and mobility is a capability that adds to a person's freedom to choose the life she values. In the Sustainable Development Goals, states committed themselves to facilitate safe, orderly, and regular migration. To facilitate means to make easier. That determination is echoed in the New York Declaration, which led states into this process of negotiating a global compact for migration. How can the Global Compact now move forward from the stirring but abstract commitments of the New York Declaration to concrete commitments? The discussions here in Puerto Vallarta have made clear that while states and other stakeholders have a common vision of safe, orderly, and regular migration, they do not have the same priorities and do not want to be bound to a one-size-fits-all path forward. The compact is likely to present a very broad framework, and no country will be able to pursue all its measures evenly at the same time. So the most realistic way forward for the compact would seem to be through a process of building coalitions of interested parties around shared priorities, voluntarily agreeing to take action together on specific issues that build toward the vision of safe, orderly, and regular migration, migration that's beneficial for countries and communities of origin and destination, as well as for people on the move. Some of these coalitions are already forming, and a few are already working. Coalitions may form around issues such as strengthening consular protection for migrants. That's one uncontroversial one that seems to have generated a lot of support. A coalition may form around creating skills partnerships, building capacity for data collection, improving the wages and working conditions of domestic workers. That one's already underway. Or ensuring access to education for migrant students, or achieving at last the long-standing goal of lowering remittance costs. Where will this coalition building take place? I've heard many interventions that recognize the value of the Global Forum on Migration and Development as an informal, state-led but not state-only process, and as a venue where states can get together to identify common interests and agree to work together. Once coalitions are formed, they could be serviced by IOM, as it services most of the regional consultation processes, for example, as well as projects like the Migrants in Countries in Crisis initiative. Making coalition building a more explicit function of the Global Forum would not change its character and is not incompatible with more formal reviews of progress toward the Global Compact, for example, at the high-level dialogues in the UN. It's fortunate that the formal adoption of the Global Compact will coincide in time and in place with the 11th Global Forum on Migration and Development in December in Marrakesh. This provides a great opportunity to start implementing the Global Compact for migration the very next day, or maybe the day before, depending on the sequence of those meetings. If states bring their ideas and commitments to partnership to the GFMD and just get started. The coalition approach, or what some have called mini-multilateralism, is particularly well suited to a global compact. If we think of a compact as a set of mutually reinforcing commitments from diverse actors involving collaborative projects, resources, and policy changes designed to achieve a shared vision. We have our shared vision, articulated both in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and in the New York Declaration. The vision is safe, orderly, and regular migration. Often the shared vision is the hardest part, but we have that. And the fact that it's articulated in the same words in the major global policy document on development and the major global policy document on migration shows that these two processes are well aligned, as so many of you have called for. The vision of safe, orderly, and regular migration as the basis of the Migration Compact implies a balanced approach to the needs of countries of origin, transit, and destination, and it accommodates the reality that so many countries, like our host here today, are all three. It also has room for the involvement of other stakeholders, as envisioned in the New York Declaration and emphasized by so many interventions over the last 3 days. Each coalition that forms under the auspices of the Global Compact should adopt metrics for tracking progress on its chosen issue and invest in monitoring and real-time evaluation to make sure that they're getting where they want to go. I noticed that many delegates expressed concern about monitoring Global Compact commitments, and some even said there should be no monitoring. I think the Global Compact provides a chance to monitor in a different way from many existing mechanisms. The Global Compact process, follow-up process, should provide monitoring which is not a mechanism for accountability, but for problem solving. It's not about what states can be held to, but about what they want to do and how partnerships and coalitions can help them achieve their ambitions to improve the lives of migrants and move toward the vision of safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for your very accurate, important comments. If I may make one of my own after listening to you, probably the only area where I think, or rather, one important area where this whole process has enlightened all of us is that the differences between countries of origin and destination, that line has been substantially blurred by discovering that most of us are in fact everything and experience the phenomenon in a very holistic way. Okay, now thank you so much for your, again, for your comments and contributions. And now I'll give the floor to Professor Jibril Fall. He is a multidisciplinary and development executive, as well as visiting professor at the London School of Economics. Jibril, you have the floor, and thank you so much for taking this role.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to do what effectively is a little bit of retrospection and quite a bit of prospection, looking back to the consultations and looking forward to the negotiations. Given that negotiators are eternally obsessed with wording, I could not help but notice the etymological significance of the theme of the gathering, that is stock-taking. The origins of stock-taking is not in merchandising and inventory control. It is from medieval finance. It is from the practice of money lending. It is from the craft of tally sticks. A piece of wood in medieval times is carved into two spikes. Markings are made on both sides, and they are then torn apart. The longer piece is called a stock, and it is kept by the lender. It is a store of value and a piece of asset. The shorter piece is called a foil. It is a liability, but also a sign of creditworthiness and a sign of trustworthiness. You, the member states, are the stockholders. The migrants are the foil holders. In medieval times, both stock and foil were needed for a loan to be redeemed. Today, as it was ever does, nation states need to give admittance to migrants in order for socio-economic development and human progression itself to occur. Sir, I beg for leave that in this stock-taking meeting that I focus on the foils, the missing pieces, the doubtful pieces, in the hope that it informs the prospective stage of intergovernmental negotiations. The New York Declaration, the modalities resolution, ask that the compact comprise principles and actionable commitments such that for the first time in modern human history, there will be a framework that governs global migration. We have presented to ourselves a list, a compilation, a catalogue that is long, varied, and diverse, pertaining to actionable commitments for safe, orderly, and regular migration. The list or the stock is a good one. It is impressive, and it bodes well that the imperative of operational excellence will indeed come to pass. The contested areas, the contested pieces that I observed include three things that I want to highlight. Number one, it seems that there is divergence on labor migration, on regularization, and on the negative perceptions of publics and policymakers. On labor migration, I want to make three short observations. If there was ever an economic concept that the world and people in every street in the world should know, is the lump of labor fallacy. It is not true that when migrants come into a labor force, the labor force remains finite, therefore everyone gets a smaller piece of it. That is a fallacy. That is the lump of labor fallacy. When migrants enter a labor market, the cake grows and everyone is better for it. Second observation is we heard about the FTSE 500, about 40% of it being created, companies being created by migrants. By the time you count the children of migrants, that number becomes very big. How many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs they create? So on the one end, the highly skilled migrants, or the migrants who started low skill and grow into something else, can and are indeed job creators. But let's take the low-skilled migrants. I think we need to move away from this concept of the best and the brightest. Labor is labor. The whole world recognizes that we need labor. Unfortunately, we don't like the people that come with it. I think the narrative should be about hard-working migrants, not necessarily the best and the brightest. On regularization, it is almost impossible, in my humble opinion, that we can talk of safe, orderly, and regular migration without having to deal with irregularity and regularization. Indeed, I fully understand the moral hazard of floodgates argument, that if you regularize, you open up the floodgates for more irregular migrants. The evidence that this happens is not conclusive at all. But even if we err on the caution that it might be the case, there is indeed many possibilities of a technical fix. Perhaps we should be talking about not mass regularization, but methodical regularization. After all, very many countries, including ones that would say they are against regularization, do have ongoing program of regularization, either overt or covert. Now, after all, if somebody lives in a country for a given period of time, all of the human rights tenets that we subscribe to suggest that they need to be regularized so that their conditions are safe, that they live in an orderly manner, and that their children and descendants would be more productive citizens. And sometimes we are very worried about the huge difficulty of achieving this. But just think about it. Only a few years ago, many people would say that the kafala system or sponsorship, that you cannot touch that the Middle East would never consider thinking of ending that. Yet as we speak, we are seeing experimentation and attempts being made for progressive reform. Think about it. What conference on earth would have been able to convince country to take more than 1 million refugees as their share, where others would reject 10s or 20s. It wouldn't have happened in a conference. In reality, it has happened. And this is an opportunity, perhaps, to give gratitude and thanks to those countries that are host to refugees from all over the world. Then we come to the perception of migrants in a negative sense. It is indeed the case that perceptions are not formed by facts. They are formed by stories. And the story need not be true. So myth and mythology are extremely important to the human condition. This is why we remember works on fiction, yet the textbook that we studied for 5 years at high school, we do not remember it, because stories registered, we are wired that way. So I suppose what we need to concentrate is telling positive stories. Those who reject migration, whether the facts are there or not, they will not accept it. But for the policymakers and that category, they do need the facts for evidence. It is also worth noting that what the public is interested in is not necessarily in the public interest. And this is where we've heard it from the SRSG and others, that in these critical moments, leadership is needed. And as Peter Drucker once said, a leader does the right thing. It is managers who do things right. And the Pope Francis have told us that we require for this compact foresight, compassion, and courage. Compassion for humans is needed irrespective of refugee status. And this is where an element of overlap happens. One does not have to be running to protect life, limb, and liberty in order to deserve compassion. Non-refugee migrants may be migrating to improve livelihood and lifestyle. What is wrong about wanting a better life for one's family? Nothing at all. And those two deserve compassion. I have, in my view, I think it is possible to get a compact that builds on what exactly exists, as we've heard from every member state, in a manner that prioritizes implementation. We are all prone to biases. I am urging member states to decide purposefully for an implementation bias, that on this compact, we are biased towards the likelihood of implementing it. I have, in a flippant moment, published a paper called Over-Principled and Underperforming. The United Nations is kind enough to put it on their website, and copies of it are outside. And in the back of it, I have suggested a format which, in my view, can give us a 10-page compact. A simple preamble, a simple statement that reaffirms every commitment that exists, not more than a paragraph that confirms everything that happens. Then it reaffirms existing agreements. Then we can examine our minds, we can examine our hearts, we can examine the state of our countries, and we can decide what new principles do we want to bring in the arena of global migration governance. Perhaps for the first time, the principle of regularization would be there, and member states can have a debate. Do you have to be in a country for 3 years, or 7 years, or 15 years to be regularized? But the principle may indeed be there, and it would be new. The act of underperformance, or the eventuality of underperformance, is not one of acts alone, it is one of omission. That is why I think there should be a short section on what I call commit to omit. There are certain things that happen in global migration that must not happen. For example, the detention of children. Why don't we have a short section? And all of these things that are repugnant to human decency are put in that section, commit to omit. The actionable commitments, I've been very impressed. Not on day 2, not on day 1, but on day 2. We had an extremely long and impressive list of actionable commitments. Those can be put as an annex, as actionable options that countries can use based on their resources, their appetite, and their circumstances. I think there should be, in this era of sustainable development goals, a new principle of implementation that we, for a moment, sort of take shame, take umbrage from the fact that we are not good at implementation. And we remember that every underperformance means lives being lost, opportunities being lost, and generations suffering. So a principle of adherence to implementation and operational excellence may indeed be important. We've heard earlier this morning from Colleen about review mechanism, that we should substantiate it perhaps with a migration facility. All of those operational structures need to be there so that we would announce our intent, our commitment to make sure that implementation happens on this basis. But I do agree with some of the things I've heard from member states about monitoring and evaluation. The only purpose, in my view, of monitoring in this case is so that we can improve. So we can do review, monitoring, and improvement. And in terms of the new architecture, perhaps the Global Forum for Migration and Development would be a suitable annual mechanism for member states to discuss, not to name and shame, but to discuss how to improve. Sir, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Jibril, also for your comments and all your suggestions for us, all your analysis. Very, very welcome. And now I have the pleasure to give the floor to the Special Representative, Madam Louise Arbour, also for her takeaways of these 3 days, as well as probably some elements on the future report of the ESG. Louise, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Gomez Camacho. The drive and the commitment towards bringing into being a global compact on safe, orderly, and regular migration, I think, is born of two fundamental dynamics. On the one hand, it is rooted in the many challenges that migration presents: the evolution of the world's demography, stresses in the environment, the legacy of entrenched poverty and chronic conflicts. All of this has contributed to displacement of populations, often in life-threatening or otherwise degrading situations. Often poorly regulated labor markets have attracted migrants, many in irregular situations, to work in unsafe and unfair environments. And public misperceptions of migrants, rooted in apprehension of economic decline, fear of globalization, including identity and cultural concerns, all have contributed to bringing us where we are today. Meanwhile, in the course of this process, a different aspect of human mobility has emerged, one full of promises of better and more sustainable development, more attuned to international labor market needs and to the benefits of decent work standards for all, and more responsive to the needs of vulnerable and marginalized people, both migrants and host communities. So we stand today tasked with the mandate to weave these challenges and opportunities into a global effort to enhance state cooperation in the management of migration. The Global Compact will be a product of our time, a time of transition, of uncertainty, of both apprehension and excitement about the future, a time in which we are all still exploring the full implications of globalization and the technology revolution, and a time where we have consolidated the pillars of multilateralism, respect for state sovereignty, and enhanced interstate cooperation, pursuit of sustainable development, conflict prevention, and protection for human rights. It's in this context that the Secretary General's report, which should be before you probably by mid-January, will seek to contribute to the shaping of the Global Compact on Migration. The report will be anchored in the themes that have emerged from the very rich formal consultations that have taken place so far, and also from the many equally enriching conversations in which we have all participated in the course of the last few months. Putting this report together would not have been possible without the inputs that we received from many of you in this room, alongside many others. And in particular, I would like to make special note of the support and contributions made to this endeavor by the International Organization of Migration, and I thank all of you for this. The Secretary General's report will not be a reiteration of statements and commitments made so far. Rather, it will be an articulation of what he views as the opportunities to be, what challenges the Compact should seek to overcome, and a proposal as to a range of solutions or approaches that merit exploration and consideration. Permeating it will be 4 points of emphasis. First, that the Global Compact must be true to its title. It must be global. This means that migration is neither a unique experience, let alone a unique burden on any one state or region. Regardless of any action we might take, migration will continue and it will likely grow. It is an experience of immense significance for the migrants themselves, but also it impacts on the communities from which they come and into which they settle. Second, the Compact must be grounded in a strong cooperative framework. It must be respectful of different perspectives. The particularities of migration do vary considerably from state to state, from region to region, including actually from different regions within a state, and actually from time to time. Cooperation does not require uniformity, quite the opposite. The Compact should facilitate and support regional initiatives that are flexible and responsive to local particularities. And cooperation must work to enhance global security, but by ensuring the effective control that states must exercise over who enters and stays in their countries and on what terms, while guaranteeing greater protection for all under the rule of law. This is a matter of state security, of public safety, and of individual protection. All these three coexist. Third, the era of implementation clearly has arrived. I believe the Secretary General will encourage implementation of the many commitments that have already been made and will favor initiatives that are expected to produce concrete, measurable results. Many long-standing commitments can be implemented now. For many others, real progress can be made, whether by the entire UN membership or, as it been pointed out by others, by different regional groupings, or in fact other configurations, also mobilizing many non-state actors. And underpinning all these commitments, invariably, will be our belief in the universality of our human rights and our drive, our communal drive, towards realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. Safe, orderly, and regular migration cannot be reduced exclusively to a question of development and rights, and yet it cannot be realized unless it's grounded in both. And finally, none of this is possible without political leadership. Migration often generates a discourse in which popular perception runs counter to the demands of sound policy making. This requires us to focus on three perspectives. We must make every effort to avoid language which has the effect of dehumanizing those whose interest we seek to protect. We must strive at every turn to base our discourse on facts, not on perception. And we must design policies that are inclusive. The fight against inequality is of equal relevance to migrants and non-migrants alike and must begin with a focus on the most vulnerable. And in this regard, I want to make a special note of gender. Equality and the empowerment of women and the protection of their rights should be core principles of any emerging compact, as should the best interest of children always anchor all decisions affecting them. The Secretary General will look at the situation of regular migrants, the majority, and how best to ensure that the vulnerabilities that they face are reduced and the benefits they bring with them and send home are maximized. He will look at the situation of irregular migrants and ways to bring them out of the shadows in which they too can face lives of uncertainty and insecurity, and in which their contributions, if regularization is brought forward, can be better acknowledged. He will look at the signature issue of our time, the tragedy of large mixed flows of people on the move, and how to deal with those who are ineligible for international refugee protection, yet for whom humanitarian assistance and long-term solutions are no less urgent. Finally, the Secretary General will reflect on issues of system response, intergovernmental oversight, and global compact follow-up. All three are vital, all are interlinked, and all dependent, of course, on the shape and content of the final product. But here too, three things are evident. First, the Secretary General is determined to ensure that the United Nations system is well positioned to respond effectively to any calls by the membership to assist in implementing the Global Compact. As migration finds its better home in the United Nations, we will rededicate ourselves to ensuring that our support for you is the best it can be, that it maximizes all the contributions that the system can bring to bear, that it takes full advantage of the unique migration capacities and expertise of IOM alongside others, and that it focuses squarely on delivering. Second, a corollary of integrating migration better into the United Nations is that member states may wish to reflect on whether, and if so how, current oversight mechanisms are best configured. The Secretary General will offer his support here as needed. And finally, he will stress the point that the Global Compact can only ever be part of a process. As dynamics change in ways both anticipated and likely not always successfully anticipated, there will be a need for you, the member states, to return to this issue over the years, allowing opportunities for adjustments to be made as circumstances dictate. None of this is necessarily easy. We would not be here if it were. But what is certain is that the commitment is the commitment of all people in this room and many, many others elsewhere to make the Global Compact the best it can be. What is also certain is the unbending commitment of the Secretary General to assist you in this task. And what is certain above all else are the legitimate demands of all migrants that the words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights apply to them as well to all others. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. As always, tremendously powerful and incredibly lucid, these words. Thank you very much. And now I have the pleasure to hand over to my colleague, Ambassador Lauber.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have some time left for concluding remarks from the delegations. I know it's very tempting to make more general statements again at this point, but we would once again plead with you to be short and succinct, raise some of the issues you were not able to raise over the last 3 days, and give us again specific pointers on your priorities and your proposals for the time to come. Also, I would very much invite you to stick to, if at all possible, to the 2-minute limit. We have a number of speakers on the list that were not able to take the floor this morning. Denmark, the Philippines, Cambodia, Bolivia, Italy, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Switzerland, and Turkey. If you ask for the floor and don't find yourself on the list I just read out, please press the button again and press it only once, because pressing it twice takes you on and off the list immediately. We're starting with Denmark. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jörg, and thanks to the two panelists and to Louise for kind of rounding off in a very eloquent way, and we can follow a lot of those points that you made. Let me just, first of all, associate myself with what my colleague from the EU said earlier today, and absolutely also what he will say later on. But the few points from our side also kind of reflecting on what we have discussed the past 3 days. I think a lot of convergence, non-binding, non-legal character of the compact, full commitment, focus on drivers of migration, and in particular focus both on the regular migration and irregular migration, as also was mentioned by Louise. The obligations of all states in the different aspects, I think, was very important as well. And then I think, leading on from there, a point that was made already by Ambassador Schmidt-Bremme Monday, and somehow reflected also today by Louise Arbour. This is going to be a global compact, universal in character. Everybody has to be able to see its own, our own interests reflected. Everybody and therefore it also have to reflect the political reality of all member states. And this is one of the challenges, but I think that's something that we need to recognize from the beginning as well. And then perhaps a few comments on the follow-up that was that I didn't get to mention this morning. We agree on the leading role of IOM, but I think also this morning showed that there's a need for a lot more thinking on what does that mean and what does it mean when we talk about follow-up and monitoring. We agree that we should monitor mapping progress, and I would in particular echo what my good Australian colleague Gillian said this morning. We are at the moment working a lot, supporting the Secretary General in his endeavor to put reform through the UN system, avoid working in silos. So let's not create a new silo here. We shouldn't build up capacity, for instance, that the IOM has already, and they have a lot in this, and are definitely a leading agency. But likewise, we shouldn't build up capacity in the IOM that may already be other places in the UN system. So I think that's some of the things that we at least take from here, and just to assure you of Denmark's commitment to play and be a very constructive partner as we move ahead. Thanks a lot.
Thank you much, Ip. I have the Philippines next.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to the distinguished panelists for your invaluable insights. The Philippines recognizes its international obligation to help manage the phenomenon of migration, knowing fully well that it touches the concerns and aspirations of countries of origin, transit, and destination. We are grateful for the space afforded by this meeting, which allowed us to refine our insights and collective learnings in the first phase of the GCM process, and which brought us into sharper focus the trajectory that we must take in order to achieve and arrive at an empowering framework for migrants and their families. As we discuss the way forward, we take this opportunity to re-emphasize 4 main points upon which we believe the GCM should be anchored. First, migrants must always be at the center of the migration discourse. The GCM must advocate the recognition of migrants as crucial enablers of development who have significantly contributed to countries of origin, transit, and destination. Moreover, preferential attention must be given to migrants who fall between the cracks, specifically those who are made vulnerable by circumstances or those who, for one reason or another, find themselves in precarious situations. Second, the holistic and human rights-based approach to migration must be pursued at all times. While specific priority rights may be peculiar to each region, like the right to legal and consular assistance, the right to medical care, the right to be registered at birth, and the right to return to one's state of origin, the inalienability and universality of human rights is guaranteed and must be upheld. Third, enlisting the support, cooperation, and commitment of all stakeholders is crucial. Towards this end, utilization of existing frameworks, processes, and mechanisms such as the Abu Dhabi Dialogue, Bali Process, Colombo Process, Global Forum on Migration and Development, the Migrants in Countries in Crisis Initiative, and the ASEAN must be encouraged. Moreover, as we have consistently said, the IOM, along with other UN agencies with migration-related functions, should have an important role in the implementation and review of the GCM. And fourth, the principle of shared responsibility and spirit of international cooperation must pervade each actionable and doable commitment. While GCM itself is intended to be non-prescriptive, each state party and stakeholder must be guided by the highest standard of ethical accountability. All must strive to achieve the highest deliverable framework of cooperation and commitments. Having been enriched by the diversity of perspectives and experiences shared during the stock-taking meeting, the Philippines reaffirms its faith and commitment to the GCM process and remains willing and ready to reinforce its leadership as appropriate. On behalf of the Philippine government, we'd like to express our gratitude to the organizers of this preparatory stock-taking meeting with the support of the government of Mexico for the excellent arrangements and generous hospitality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cambodia is next.
Your Excellencies, co-chairs, and distinguished delegates from over the world, Cambodia recognized the new phenomenon of migration, which play a crucial role for development, and it's become a social, economic, and political issues due to the under-management capacity and its potential impact, which sometimes leads to exploitation, human smuggling and trafficking, and other new forms of modern slavery. We also recognize the challenge of both origin and destination countries, and we support strongly the initiative of develop the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, while no country could manage and solve this issue alone. In this regard, Cambodia would like to reaffirm the commitment to support GCM development and express our concern with some proposed recommendations to be considered for the development of the Global Compact as follows. First, GCM should focus on the roles and fair share of responsibility of the origin, transit, and destination countries, and the regional community to ensure the protection of human rights and interests of labor, migrant, and family within the whole cycle of migration since departure at workplace, return, and reintegration process, with regular and humane kind-based solution, gender responsive, especially among irregular and undocumented migrants, by addressing the specific vulnerability of women and underaging workers and children on the move. Enable them to access to regular and safe channel for migration through bilateral MOUs or agreement for labor supply and protection of with clear work condition contract arrangement with well understanding. Second, address the impact of labor migration and decent work standards, including equal treatment in employment and other strategies for prevention, protection, and law enforcement to investigate and encounter related crime regarding against migrant workers, including smuggling, exploitation, and all forms of human trafficking. Third, migrant workers should be promoted by giving them proper skill development and recognize their experiences and skills made during their job performance. Fourth, migrant workers should be allowed to claim their rights protection, especially among skilled and low-skilled workers who are at risk and at hardship work, such as fishermen, and facilitate them for availability, access to full wage, appropriate services, and low-rate remittances. In addition, Cambodia recognizes and supports the role of IOM to well place in coordination and support the national, regional, and global mechanism in the follow-up and review the GCM to ensure that the process will be efficient and cost-effectiveness. Finally, Cambodia also like to highlight the needs of collaboration and support from the other UN agencies and international organizations who are keen and working actively on migration and anti-trafficking related issues in our region, as well as UN Act, a project of UNDP for anti-trafficking activities support in Mekong sub-region, as well as civil society who are working underground.
Thank you very much. I have 26 speakers on the list. If we want to finish by 5:15, which we have to, you will have to limit yourself to about 2 minutes. I have the plurinational state of Bolivia next.
Gracias, presidente. Voy a plantear 3 elementos como posición de mi país. El primero, parte de indicar que este proceso de diálogo y negociación del Pacto Mundial sobre Migración ya tiene un primer resultado sustantivo al colocar en el centro del debate global a la movilidad humana. Los migrantes, refugiados, dejan de ser datos, cifras, chalecos flotantes, para recobrar su cualidad de seres humanos que se ven forzados a huir de las guerras, a huir de las consecuencias del cambio climático y del hambre, producto de las asimetrías entre los estados. Reconociendo la diferencia entre migrantes y refugiados, consideramos que la actual crisis migratoria es una cuestión que va incluso a la vida o la muerte de las personas, de millones y millones de personas, sobre todo de niños y niñas. Por lo cual, los compromisos a los que se arribe en el Pacto Mundial deben trascender lo declarativo o una buena narrativa e ir al pleno ejercicio de los derechos de los migrantes y refugiados. Un diálogo sincero y comprometido, efectivos, pasan por solidificar el sistema normativo e institucional internacionales existentes, pero también pasa por pedir, por ejemplo, a los países desarrollados que suscriban la Convención Internacional sobre Protección de los Derechos de todos los trabajadores migrantes y de sus familias. Bolivia, entendiendo que este es un proceso gradual, no renuncia a que el pacto se revista de un carácter vinculante. Segundo elemento, fiel al mandato de la Conferencia Mundial de los Pueblos por un mundo sin muros hacia la ciudadanía universal, Bolivia plantea que se debe hablar solo de Pacto Mundial sobre Migración, sin mayores complementos, debido a que el enfoque de seguridad, de orden y regularidad no incluye todos los elementos del enfoque humanista o basado en derechos humanos que tanto se ha hablado en este foro. El Pacto Mundial tampoco podría alejarse en sus compromisos de la consideración real de las causas estructurales que provocan la migración. Finalmente, Bolivia considera que esta reunión debería de incluir en sus resultados una referencia expresa a la decisión unilateral de Estados Unidos de retirarse de este proceso, a la vez de resaltar que la práctica totalidad de los estados reunidos en este foro renovamos nuestro firme compromiso de alcanzar los resultados en el pacto. Creemos que la conferencia de Vallarta debe servir, entre otros, para que el pacto tenga una mirada de la migración como una oportunidad que debemos abrazar y no un problema solo de combatir. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Italy is next.
Thanks, Chair. Buenas tardes. Primero quiero agradecer mucho al Gobierno de México para su hospitalidad en estos días y por la asistencia que nos ha garantizado durante los trabajos aquí en Puerto Vallarta. Muchas gracias. I also want to thank the Secretary General Representative, Madame Arbor, and the co-facilitators. They've done a great job and they brought us here in Puerto Vallarta, I think, with a great experience and with great contains. First of all, let me express the support of Italy to the positions of the European delegation expressed during these days, but I also refer particularly to the position that has been expressed this morning about implementation. I refer in particular to the non-binding nature of the GCM, to the need to avoid duplications and to keep the exercise into the UN fora, and the leading role of IOM, all all topics that we fully support. I think something we all have agreed during these discussions is that migration has been a fundamental part of human development through history, but as assumed now, a very different and unprecedented dimension. For this reason, in order to improve migration governance, the Italian vision is to shift the focus on human mobility from an emergency approach to an encompassing and long-term one. In managing human mobility, Italy embraces two main principles. The principle of shared responsibility. Italy promotes a common responsibility in managing the flows to ensure a safe and orderly migration, in protecting people on the move, and in particular the most vulnerable ones, such as women and unaccompanied minors, also through humanitarian corridors. The principle of partnership is also very important for us among countries of origin, transit, and destination, all the actors along the migration chain, to address the global phenomenon in a comprehensive way. We'd like the GCM to pursue three main pillars: human rights, to be human rights centered, and to guarantee human rights for all those in the move. The nexus between migration and development. Development cooperation strategies should be interlinked to the national migration policies. A balance between the right to mobility and the right of states to determine criteria for the admission of people in their territories, combining solidarity and security. The objectives that we'd like also to pursue through the GCM are therefore investing in countries of origin and transit on the basis of specific partnership arrangements, financing sustainable projects with high social and economic impact, since development is key to address the root causes of migration.
Thank you very much.
And protecting the most vulnerable among people on the move, and valuing the positive aspects of migration also into our countries.
Thank you much. Guatemala is next.
Facilitador. Guatemala, como país de origen, tránsito, destino y retorno de diferentes flujos migratorios, está comprometida con el proceso de construcción del Pacto Mundial para una migración segura, ordenada y regular, y estima indispensable concretar un mecanismo de seguimiento. En ese sentido, consideramos que la Organización Mundial para las Migraciones puede ser el ente encargado de la implementación, monitoreo y evaluación del Pacto Mundial sobre Migración, tomando en consideración su experiencia y capacidades en el fortalecimiento de la gobernanza migratoria a todos los niveles. Asimismo, es necesario que el pacto reafirme la universalidad de los derechos humanos y la inalienabilidad de los mismos para las personas migrantes, independientemente de su condición migratoria. La migración debe ser abordada desde un enfoque de derechos humanos y no exclusivamente desde un enfoque basado en la seguridad. Debemos seguir articulando esfuerzos interinstitucionales e intersectoriales para continuar trabajando a nivel nacional, regional y mundial, recordando siempre que el centro de estas negociaciones es la protección de la persona migrante, particularmente las niñas, niños y adolescentes migrantes acompañados y no acompañados. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Costa Rica is next.
Gracias, señores presidentes. 3 puntos importantes a los que se quiere referir Costa Rica como país. Primeramente es nuestra visión ante el Pacto Mundial. Lo consideramos como una gran iniciativa para la gobernanza de la migración con enfoque humano armonioso para con el desarrollo sostenible. Por eso Costa Rica está ya realizando esfuerzos nacionales, binacionales y regionales para que nuestro accionar sea realmente coherente con los principios que expone el Pacto Mundial. Asimismo, consideramos el Pacto Mundial, consideramos que sus principios son prácticos y posibles de acoger en forma voluntaria y efectiva. En el punto 2 quisiéramos hacer una recomendación y es la posibilidad de considerar espacios para visualizar beneficios que el Pacto Mundial aportará en materia de acogida, protección e integración, así como la lucha contra el tráfico ilícito de migrantes, y sumarle a esto los aportes que la sociedad civil pueda dar en medición de beneficios a los más importantes, que son las personas migrantes. Nuestro tercer punto sería cuál es nuestra expectativa y el desafío más grande que nosotros visualizamos es poder avanzar hacia una responsabilidad compartida, hacia un mejor accionar binacional en pro de la protección de la vida de las personas en el cruce de nuestras fronteras. Para finalizar, queremos mencionar que Costa Rica reconoce el gran trabajo que realiza la OIM como respaldo técnico y apoyo a nuestras labores. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Switzerland is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me return back to this morning's discussion on follow-up and review. I join others regarding using existing structures, and to save time, I simply refer to the statement made by Germany regarding the role of the GFMD, the high-level dialogue, and the important link and alignment with the HLPF, all points that we fully support as well. A comparative follow-up and review architecture should foresee processes at all levels. Regional processes should therefore reflect the important role played by RCPs, but also other regional bodies. At national level, follow-up and review should be done through a whole-of-government approach that includes subnational and local authorities. Third, both the implementation and review of the GCM requires a UN which is fit for purpose. Let me reiterate the significant role the IOM should play as a primus inter pares, as mentioned by many other delegations throughout the day. It is a system that also should recognize the comparative advantage of other international organizations such as the ILO and labor migration, an area of pivotal importance for the Global Compact. Fourth, we see the Global Compact implementation as a space for partnership, innovation, and hard work by all stakeholders. This is in line with our commitment towards multi-stakeholder alliances as anchored in the New York Declaration, and it can follow very well the principle of mini-multilateralism as suggested in the Sutherland report. Fifth and last point, moving forward with the implementation, the follow-up and review of the Global Compact, we should continue allowing for the necessary interactions with all stakeholders, with the private sector, civil society, trade unions, diaspora organizations, migrants organizations. They are our partners, they are with us in the option to move forward on the Global Compact, and we should include them at every step of the way. Let me conclude, since this is the concluding session, by thanking the government of Mexico and the people of Jalisco for the hospitality. Puerto Vallarta has provided the needed additional knowledge and common understanding, as well as the motivation, commitment, and energy to move forward. Moving forward towards an ambitious, human rights-based and gender-sensitive Global Compact rooted in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Turkey is next.
Thank you, Jörg. Turkey appreciates the work of the co-facilitators and the Secretary General of the conference, Ms. Harbour, in ably steering the process on the Global Compact. We thank the government of Mexico for its generosity in hosting this meeting. As we conclude an important milestone, I would like to underline the following points to complement the position of Turkey in the phase 1 and 2 of the process to adopt the GCM. First, GCM provides the international community with the opportunity to create a more coherent, comprehensive, and better coordinated approach to migration. It can also act as a springboard for strengthening international cooperation among all stakeholders. Through recognizing the strong link between migration and development, GCM should equip the international community with practical implementation tools in harnessing the potential of migrants to contribute to the development efforts as part of the 2030 Agenda. Second, GCM should underpin the basic premise that the dignity and well-being of migrants depend on international responsibility sharing and cooperation among all stakeholders. The issue of migration needs a far more comprehensive human rights-based approach. It's essential to instill the idea that migrants are not viewed as plain commodities or factors of production, but human beings with rights. In this respect, GCM could have the potential to make a real difference to the lives of some of the world's most vulnerable people. The Compact should underscore our collective commitment to eliminate religious and ethnic discrimination, racism, xenophobia, and our pledge to curb migrant smuggling and eliminating human trafficking and create an atmosphere of tolerance. Third, through GCM, we should aim for a step change in migration through a whole-of-government approach and a whole-of-society concept. Moreover, through GCM, we should be able to set guidelines on gathering and using data on migration to achieve sound analysis and policies. Last but not least, another aspect of the GCM should be about addressing the root causes of irregular migration. It is of utmost importance to support peace processes and promote peaceful settlement of disputes in conflict-affected areas. Stepping up humanitarian aid and development assistance in the countries of transit and origin is also more than necessary. Mr. Chair, as underscored by the Secretary General of the Conference, Ms. Harbour, we all need to push for a more forward-looking and positive understanding of migration and mixed flows. Protecting the human rights, dignity, and well-being of migrants is directly linked with their capacity to take active part in economic and social life that they newly embarked upon. Unfortunately, in an age of uncertainty, we see a rising trend of discrimination of all sorts, xenophobic nationalism and racism. We observe that migrants and refugees become scapegoats. In the upcoming phase, we should be aware that the anti-migrant rhetoric and acts present a huge challenge to democracies everywhere. Fear and rejection of migrants and refugees are precisely the wrong answer to security threats. This is not a time for creating new fortresses around our borders and isolating ourselves from a global discussion. It is time for strong multilateral action within the UN framework, and IOM should play a leading role in the follow-up.
Thank you.
In view of the above, Turkey stands ready to continue its constructive engagement in the upcoming negotiations to reach a global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Feridun. The next speaker is the representative of UNDP.
Thank you, Chair, and the panel for giving UNDP the opportunity to contribute to this debate. UNDP intervenes also on behalf of many of the Global Migration Group, in particular the FAO, UNFPA, UNIDO, UN Women, and WHO. They collectively stand ready, according to their individual mandates, to support the intergovernmental processes and follow-up of the implementation of the Global Compact for Migration. The 2030 Agenda provides a common basis for us to come together around new and integrated approaches. The SDGs, to which we all have committed, represent a universal, comprehensive framework that enable us to jointly tackle the drivers of migration and to ensure that no one is left behind. The critical focus on the furthest behind, which includes migrants and the host community, must remain our priority. The Agenda 2030 challenges us to work in partnership. through integrated approaches that achieve the ambition of leaving no one behind. Working together, we can find sustainable solutions for migrants wherever they are. For UNDP, addressing the drivers of migration is to improve people's lives in countries of origin, transit, and destination. We can only achieve this through partnership and collaboration with member states, UN partners, the private sector, and civil society organizations. We also believe that existing frameworks such as the International Human Rights Standards, the Sendai Framework of Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Paris Agreement can help us and guide, accelerate the follow-up and implementation of such a compact. Briefly, from a development perspective, we know that poverty, unemployment, weak governance, inequality and discrimination, climate change and environmental degradation, and violent conflicts are some of the major drivers of migration. Addressing these drivers requires sustained and integrated approaches to sustainable development. Based on our practices, we would like to make some observations to support the efforts of the Compact and the international community. Focus on sustaining peace and building resilience, conflict prevention, mediation, together with early warning and response systems to foster reconciliation that enables people to enjoy their human rights, freedom, security, economic opportunities in countries of origin. Strengthen good governance and the rule of law. Address structural inequalities, promote inclusive growth, employment, sustainable industrialization, livelihoods and agriculture, health, as well as climate mitigation and adaptation. These are long-term investments that are critical in people's decisions to migrate.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The next speaker is the representative of the International Organization of Employers. What do you want? You want me to just hit the microphone?
He's sitting here.
There you go. I don't need it. Okay. Is it on?
Yes, it's on.
Thank you. I'm Gary Slayman, a partner in a large multinational law firm, and I've been actively engaged on behalf of the GFMD business mechanism in contributing to the GFMD and to the recommendations to the Global Compact on Migration. I want to say how pleased the private sector is to have had the opportunity to submit detailed recommendations and targeted actions, which we concluded in September of this year. We were especially gratified that many of the recommendations were included in the GFMD's input to the Global Compact this November 22nd. As we are now addressing a state-led follow-up mechanism and potential partnerships, I would like to note that the GFMD business mechanism, led by the International Organization of Employers, is a trusted forum for the private sector and should continue to be relied upon for its expertise in the next period of consideration and ultimately in the implementation and follow-up phase described here today. Let me just conclude by noting that the many government and other comments today that recognize the private sector as an integral and important partner for the follow-up process. We look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll continue with the next group of speakers: Panama, Spain, Eritrea, Sudan, Peru, and New Zealand. Panama, you have the floor. Microphone for Panama. Panama, you ready to take the floor?
Buenas tardes. Panamá considera importante que el pacto no solo exprese los objetivos, sino que el mismo sea lo suficientemente dinámico para reflejarlas en la práctica. Igualmente, no deben crearse nuevas estructuras, sino utilizarse las existentes, a fin de evitar duplicar esfuerzos, generar nuevos costos que impliquen pérdida de tiempo, del cual no cuentan los migrantes que esperan respuestas a sus necesidades. Creemos fundamental consolidar el trabajo de la OIM, como también los esfuerzos regionales, entendiendo la naturaleza misma de la migración. La cooperación con otros estados, organismos y la sociedad civil es fundamental, previendo el intercambio de recursos, capacidades y experiencias, lo cual ayudará a obtener resultados concretos. Por último, creemos básico establecer mecanismos de medición y evaluación de los procesos de ejecución a fin de contar con los datos ciertos que permitan determinar su eficacia. Gracias.
Thank you very much. Spain is next.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Iniciábamos nuestras reuniones hace 2 días señalando el avance que habíamos globalmente obtenido en la buena comprensión del fenómeno migratorio, de un problema que hay que combatir a una oportunidad que hay que gestionar. Y, sobre todo, también reconociendo las diferencias que todavía profundas, como la señora Harbour reconocía el primer día, que todavía nos quedan en ese camino. Pensamos que el Pacto Global debe tener como principal objetivo precisamente consolidar ese cambio y crear un nuevo paradigma de la comprensión del fenómeno migratorio a medio y a largo plazo. Para ello pensamos que el pacto debe ser ambicioso, debe ser realista y debe ser sostenible, tanto en su contenido como en su mecanismo de seguimiento. En cuanto al contenido, pensamos que el pacto tiene que tener un contenido equilibrado, en el que todos nos sintamos a gusto y bien confortables para su posterior ejecución. Países de origen, países de destino, países de tránsito, pero también y sobre todo el migrante, que debe ponerse como el centro de todas nuestras preocupaciones y mantener y asegurar el respeto de sus derechos humanos. Tiene que haber, sin embargo, un equilibrio entre solidaridad y responsabilidad, entre derechos y deberes, entre protección y seguridad. Y, sobre todo, no debemos dejar de aspirar al objetivo de que la migración sea en el futuro una decisión y no una obligación por causas forzadas para el migrante que le obligan a migrar. Mientras esto no sea posible, ya sabemos que llevará tiempo, y por eso es un compromiso a medio y a largo plazo, debemos asegurar que la migración sea cada vez más segura para el migrante que la emprende y sea cada vez mejor gestionada para los estados afectados. En segundo lugar, esa ambición y ese realismo debe aplicarse al mecanismo de seguimiento del pacto. Pensamos, como se ha debatido esta mañana, que no necesitamos crear nuevos instrumentos ni institucionales ni financieros, que pensamos que el pacto debe ser legalmente no vinculante y, por lo tanto, la necesidad ulterior, más apremiante incluso, de ser muy eficaces y de evitar ser un mecanismo que esté orientado mucho a los resultados y evitar excesos de burocracia que nos impidan fortalecer y centrar nuestras capacidades en ese objetivo, en el hacer. Y, por último, en cuanto al mecanismo, defender la centralidad que la OIM, a nuestro juicio, debe tener en el seguimiento de ellos, evidentemente, sin perjuicio de la necesaria coordinación que debe tener con otras agencias de la familia de Naciones Unidas y sin perjuicio de otros ámbitos, como el Foro Global de Migración y Desarrollo, de poder presentar inputs a este seguimiento. Quería acabar mi alocución felicitando y dando las gracias a México por esta prueba más de su tradicional hospitalidad. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much. Eritrea is next, please.
Thank you, co-facilitators. At the outset, I want to seize this opportunity to thank the government of Mexico for the excellent organization and warm hospitality. The Global Compact on Migration provided the international community with a historic opportunity to better govern migration, save lives, and manage human mobility to the benefit of migrants, countries of origin and destination. As we embark on the intergovernmental process, we would like to highlight 3 points. First, the vantage point for the Global Compact on Migration needs to be anchored on the fact that human mobility is a development opportunity, not a security challenge. A critical outcome for Eritrea from the GCM is a practical, innovative commitment with clear deliverables with regard to enhancing contribution of migrants and diaspora communities in the development of their countries of origin. It should enable developing countries to unleash the potentials of their diaspora community by eliminating political, financial, infrastructural, and administrative barriers. Second, the intergovernmental negotiations need to be anchored on facts. This is critical because often the discourse on migration is based on perceptions, inaccurate data that perpetuates negative narrations, misunderstanding, and outlandish exaggeration. The 6 informal thematic discussions, the regional consultations, and this stock-taking meeting have provided us with a better understanding about the complexities of the phenomenon. Third, drivers of migration, the challenges, opportunities of migrants in transit and countries of destination varies. The intergovernmental negotiation needs to be mindful of these differences on various regions and migratory corridors. Fourth and finally, a strong follow-up mechanism would be critical for a global compact on migration to be meaningful. As a natural human phenomena, migration has historically played a pivotal role in shaping our world and will continue in the future. The GCM is not about more migration or curbing migration. It is about better managing a natural phenomena. Interestingly, countries who advocate for an open cross-border movements of culture, information, goods and services in the name of globalization and liberalization continues to view human movement as undesirable and threatening phenomena. We hope that the GCM will enable for a better understanding and appreciation of migration. I thank you, and I wish to assure you of Eritrea's contribution during this process.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sudan is next. Microphone for Sudan. Are you asking for the floor? We go to Peru. Peru, you have the floor.
Something wrong with the microphone.
Can we have the microphone for Peru and we try to see how we can give the floor to Sudan? I can't really see, that's everyone.
Aló. Gracias a la presidencia. En primer lugar, Perú quiere felicitar y agradecer a México y a las Naciones Unidas por este evento, saludar la presencia de los estados, de las organizaciones y de la sociedad civil con sus ponencias sobre la migración de cara a un franco proceso de globalización, lo que nos lleva a pensar en un gran mercado global. Hace unos momentos escuché al representante de Eritrea hablar sobre la liberalización de los distintos elementos que generan la producción. Y en ese marco es de suma importancia abordar el tema de los trabajadores migrantes o migrantes, trabajadores como querramos entenderlos, y darles la misma atención y el mismo trato que como Estado le hemos dado a los recursos económicos o financieros o a las mercancías, para poder realmente enfrentarnos a un gran mercado global. Y en ese marco, dentro de los criterios establecidos en la Declaración de Nueva York, particularmente en el numeral número 16, se habla de una migración ordenada, segura, regular y responsable. Este último término o este último concepto se lo escuché con mucha claridad al representante de Italia y coincidimos plenamente con ese criterio de encontrar responsabilidades o responsables en todo el fenómeno y el manejo de la gestión migratoria. Particularmente para este abordaje coincidimos que la mayoría de los estados han expresado la participación de un ente tan experimentado con más de 60 años de experiencia, que es la OIM, y que ha acompañado casi todos los procesos migratorios en el mundo, particularmente en América Latina, al lado de la Conferencia Sudamericana para Migraciones desde su inicio en el año 2000. Por eso coincidimos en que no es necesario incrementar la infraestructura y burocracia internacional cuando tenemos entidades como la OIM para efectos migratorios, tenemos la OASI, que es otra entidad vinculada directamente con los migrantes a través del manejo de los documentos de viaje y los sistemas no agresivos de control en las fronteras, como es el sistema PKD, o la OIT con su reglamentación respecto de los derechos laborales de todos los trabajadores, incluyendo los migrantes. Por eso consideramos que la OIM puede hacer el acompañamiento y seguimiento al pacto y manejándolo en forma transversal con otras agencias de Naciones Unidas vinculadas al fenómeno migratorio y todo aquello que lo vinculan a él. Finalmente, planteamos las buenas prácticas que se han manejado en América Latina, particularmente dentro del espacio de Mercosur, de la Comunidad Andina, y en el caso del Perú hemos aprobado la política nacional migratoria de cumplimiento obligatorio como una política pública para todos los estamentos del Estado.
Thank you very much.
Gracias.
I'm sorry, I still have to, somehow the speakers list is not getting smaller, but the time is running at the same time. We have New Zealand next, please.
Kia ora koutou. First of all, I'd like to thank our host this week, Mexico, as well as the co-facilitators and everyone that has contributed to this stock-taking meeting. New Zealand supports the inclusion of commitments within the Global Compact that promote both the positive aspects of migration and address the negative drivers and consequences. The commitments should be actionable and they should strengthen international cooperation, the sharing of best practice and capacity development. In particular, the Compact should include the following commitments. First, the Compact should uphold the human rights of all migrants through whole-of-government approaches to prevent migrant exploitation and ensure fair access to justice. Second, the Compact should encourage national support for integration and settlement of migrants. Third, the Compact should encourage national frameworks to combat human trafficking and people smuggling, including voluntary regional policy dialogues such as the Bali process. The Compact should encourage states to open, diversify and advertise legal pathways for migrants, particularly policies that encourage triple wins for individuals, origin and destination countries, such as circular labour mobility. And it should also accelerate progress towards already agreed remittance cost targets of 3 to 5% using practical tools. Finally, in terms of implementation, the Compact should recognise that small island developing states may have different capacities to implement any reporting and follow-up requirements. Migration is an historic and complex challenge that is not about anonymous flows of people, but concerns the real lives and hopes of individual human beings and their families. Some migration flows may result from chaos and upheaval, but properly managed, migration can and should be a source of enrichment for us all. This is the challenge before us today and over the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. UNHCR is next.
Is it because you are on? No. You blocked it. It's on again.
Can you get the microphone back there, or if else we're going to move on?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and sincere apologies. That was not an attempt on UNHCR's part to sabotage the smooth running. We had a technical error back here of the table. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the free-flowing exchange of ideas at this key stage of the process. The deliberations of the past 3 days are noteworthy for the focus on our collective shared purpose of building on the momentum created by the New York Declaration. The strength of support for human rights, regardless of an individual's migratory status, is hugely important and something that needs to see its articulation in the Migration Compact and its full realization in practice. We very much welcome the call for more regular migration pathways, including expanded labour mobility schemes in line with ILO standards, and the critical link to data with a forward-looking view that considers demographics and labour market forecasting, for example, could help to concretise some of the broad commitments we've heard here. Other forward-looking perspectives that could be usefully considered in the Global Compact on Migration include climate change adaptation, planned relocation as a last resort, or more broadly, proposed strategies around disaster risk reduction. We have listened carefully, Mr. Chair, to comments made here on the complementarity between the two compacts. UNHCR is committed to identifying, promoting, and implementing good practices that address issues of common concern to migrants and refugees, particularly in settings of mixed movements. The Global Compact on Migration has great potential to reinforce the response to immediate needs and rights, including by promoting protection-sensitive border management systems and safe and dignified reception conditions. We underscore, however, the importance of acknowledging a distinction between migrants, including those in vulnerable situations, and persons in need of international protection, in our collective efforts to ensure the most effective use of both migration and asylum regimes in response to their plight. We recognize that return and readmission of persons who do not meet entry requirements and are not in need of international protection must be addressed in accordance with human rights standards and in line with the obligations of states to readmit their nationals.
Thank you very much.
We have at the same time advocated for careful consideration of alternatives to return for compassionate and practical reasons.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is the representative of International Catholic Migration Commission.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to go after UNHCR and the presentation that connected to the Special Representative's emphasis on the importance of mixed migration and getting the broad range of protection correct across the two compacts, making sure that they work together, not only in complementarity, but in cooperation and implementation. Welcome very much the Special Representative's phrase that we're entering the era of implementation, and we would add in cooperation of a multi-actor kind. The solutions we look at together in this compact, as in the Compact on Refugees, can express a shared interest, taking forward rights, development, social cohesion, and alternatives to chaos. Many of these solutions exist. What the global compacts need to do is not reinvent the wheel. They need to get it rolling. ICMC is happy to be one of a full range of civil society organizations and networks organized on this global compact across global, regional, and national levels. We are connected and have collective voice, much of it expressed in the Now and How 10 Acts for the Global Compact document that has 200 civil society organizations signed on so far. Taking solutions forward and mechanisms that take the New York Declaration forward, this document presents a graduated timeline that we thought actually was missing in the New York Declaration last year, a timeline reasonable for us to work at implementation and cooperation. It presents 4 processes that should take place over the next 2 years on some of the harder issues that we're probably not going to finish by the time negotiations are done in July. Return and readmission, regularization, migrants in vulnerable situations, and climate-induced displacement. And last, a reflection of civil society on governance. First, getting migration and IOM fully integrated in the UN system, and second, reasonably planning for the possibility that this compact will succeed by building a transition period of 2 years where the special representative will work with IOM and also UNHCR, ILO, OHCHR, and UNODC.
Thank
so
you
we
very much.
move forward.
Thank you very much, John. The next speakers is Ethiopia, then the European Union, Holy See, Egypt, and India. Ethiopia, you have the floor. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Let me join my colleagues in thanking the presenters for their thought-provoking presentation. We would like in particular to mention the powerful message by Mr. Jibril Fall on the burden of countries who are hosting large refugee. And I believe the idea of and the principle of responsibility sharing would be one of the takeaways of this meeting. Having that in mind, let me reiterate some of the wish list we wish to have on the GCM. The first one is we want the Global Compact to be labor responsive, and we aspire, we wish the GCM to aspire to reinforce existing platforms where origin and the destination countries work towards labor demand-driven labor migration. As such, we want the GCM to create a global platform for skills identification, skills development, and recognition. Third, to better enforce migrants' rights, the GCM should include capacity building to origin countries in labor inspection, consular, and victim support, and enhance the role of civil society migrant workers, especially who are those engaged in advocacy and observance of rights of migrant workers. For the GCM should emphasize also circular migration of highly skilled labor to help origin countries spur transformational growth in their own national development plans. On leveraging diaspora contribution, we believe that the focus given to remittances, economic remittances, should be balanced by social remittances in skill and know-how transfer, and as such, the GCM should aspire to fill the gaps in diaspora mapping, data collection, and evidence-based policy making. On economic remittances, commitments should go beyond transfer costs and include giving opportunities for households to channel remittances for investment and poverty reduction schemes. 7, in relation to fighting smuggling and trafficking, we want a stricter regulation of private employment agencies, especially those engaged in a disguised form of smuggling. This has been a challenge in our case. And also, capacity building should be an important aspect of it.
Thank you very much.
In fighting irregular migration, we want the GCM to address drivers of migration, especially youth unemployment and expanding legal pathways. And finally, last point about return, we want the compact to end mass deportation and expulsions, which are undignified and burdensome to origin countries.
Thank you very much.
And finally, we would like to thank the government of Mexico for the warm hospitality accorded to our delegation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. European Union is next.
Thank you, Chair. We're encouraged by the wide participation and the strong engagement shown by all people present at this meeting from all regions, and we are looking forward to working with all partners towards a solid and successful global compact on migration. Our starting point in that work must be the recognition that migration is about people. It's part of what people do. It's part of humankind's past and future. So we must take a people-centered approach to our work, highlighting the benefits and opportunities that migration can offer, and also addressing the needs of migrants in vulnerable situations. Throughout, the protection and promotion of the rights of migrants, of all migrants, in particular women and children, must underpin our actions. Beyond the individuals, migration can provide opportunities for the countries of origin, transit and destination, but only if it is safe, orderly and regular. Migration should be a choice, not an obligation. We need to address the drivers of migration, whether they are conflict, climate change, lack of inclusion in a rule of law society, or lack of opportunities. Whatever drives it, we must invest in the development of opportunities, particularly for youth. We should build our actions on solidarity and shared responsibility. We need to work together to expand and strengthen the frameworks for regular migration, but also address the challenges of irregular migration, which otherwise undermines our efforts to build a facilitating environment. In that respect, it's particularly important to redouble the efforts to fight trafficking in human beings and migrant smuggling, and to promote cooperation on good border management. We equally want to underline the responsibility of every state to ensure the well-being of their own nationals, wherever they are. This includes effective cooperation and facilitation of returns of those who find themselves in an irregular and unsustainable situation outside their own country, accompanied, as appropriate, by targeted reintegration assistance.
Thank you very much.
Just a few more words, sorry, Chair. In a broader context, we should work together to counter false expectations or xenophobic misperceptions with strong communication strategies and awareness raising that can help inform choices to be made. I'd like to thank you, the co-facilitators, for the solid preparation and firm guidance throughout these interactive discussions, which have helped us take the process forward. Also, a word of appreciation, of course, to SRSG, Louise Arbour. And my very last words of thanks go to the government of Mexico and the authorities of the state of Jalisco for the warm welcome and excellent arrangements for this meeting.
Thank you very much. Holy See is next.
Mr. Co-Facilitator, an adequate framework in international response must include short, medium, and long-term approaches to migration management. These approaches must acknowledge both the right to migrate and the sovereign right of the states to protect their borders and set migration policy in full respect for the human rights of migrants, regardless of their migration status. Short-term approaches in migration management invariably include answering the immediate and basic needs of migrants, respecting international humanitarian law, human rights, and the rule of law. Medium-term approaches recognize that migration is a right and responds to the innate desire of every human being for happiness, greater opportunities, and a better life. They include, among others, the adoption of policies that would increase regular pathways for migration and seek creative, durable solutions for forced migrations. In the long term, and lastly, an adequate framework for safe, orderly, and regular migration must first and foremost respect the prior right of all to remain in their countries in peace and security. Migration should not be a desperate necessity, it should be a choice. To make migration a choice and not a necessity, states must commit themselves to a long-term approach to peace and security through preventing and ending armed conflicts and violence, investing in jobs, education, health, and services that will allow people to remain in their homeland without being constrained to flee or leave. In the spirit of compassion, Pope Francis invites us, let us embrace all those who flee hunger and war or are forced by discrimination, persecution, poverty, and environmental degradation to leave their homeland. Migrants are in search of peace and security, development, and the full enjoyment of their rights. Let us work to ensure that the Global Compact on safe, orderly, and regular migration will make these United Nations pillars its very foundations as well. Thank you, Mexico. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Egypt is next.
Thank you. Allow me at the outset to extend my thanks to the two co-facilitators for their excellent stewardship of the process, as well as to reconvey our sincere gratitude to the government of Mexico for hosting this very important stock-taking meeting. Egypt attaches great importance in the elaboration of the Global Compact on safe, regular, and orderly migration. As explained in our numerous interventions over the course of the past few days, Egypt looks forward to a compact which is action-oriented, concise, and non-legally binding, that can provide overall guidance on migration governance. The guiding principles of this compact should be a reflection of the global commitments enshrined in the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, as well as the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants. Meanwhile, the actionable commitments should be a practical elaboration of these global consensus-based standards. Egypt regards the nexus between migration and development as a crucial component of the discussion. Thus, we affirm that states should deliver on their commitments in the areas of official development assistance, international cooperation, technology transfer, and sustainable investments, in the areas of job creation, education, healthcare, among others, in countries of origin. Egypt also attaches equal importance to the safeguarding of the rights and dignity of migrants, as well as to transforming the commitments to facilitate legal pathways for migration into reality. With regard to the frameworks for follow-up and review of the Global Compact of Safe, Regular, and Orderly Migration, we should consider the optimal utilization of the existing intergovernmental institutional frameworks and architectures. The process needs to be effective and coherent in a manner that ensures a sound implementation of the Compact. Periodic national self-assessments and multi-stakeholder consultations should also be promoted. Migration, being a cross-cutting theme mainstreamed in the 2030 Agenda, should always deserve its fair share in the follow-up and review of Sustainable Development Goals. These follow-up practices should be supported by a delicate facility of technical cooperation and capacity building, particularly for developing countries, as well as wide dissemination of best practices at the national, regional, and international levels. Finally, the IOM, being the specialized agency dedicated to migration issues at the UN family, should naturally play a leading role in this follow-up and review process. Any follow-up and review should be state-led and intergovernmental in nature and supported by the UN Secretariat based on core budgetary resources. Other formal and informal arrangements, including the GFMD, are encouraged to continue to engage and contribute to the post-compact stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
India is next, followed by Uruguay. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the outset, I would like to compliment the Government of Mexico for the excellent hospitality and arrangements, and the co-facilitators, panelists, and all participants for their valuable contribution to the deliberations of this stock-taking meeting of GCM. Government of India believes that mobility of migrants is an integral component of global economy that contributes to the overall prosperity in the countries of the origin and the destination. There is therefore a need to promote its importance and utility both for the countries of origin and countries of destination. We believe that Compact on Migration must retain focus on the phenomenon that is intrinsically linked to globalization while recognizing the important role played by the regional consultative processes like Colombo Process, Abu Dhabi Dialogue, etc. The Global Compact for Migration, while reaffirming the sovereignty rights of states to manage migrants, should foster an environment of trust and understanding. And finally, we believe that the GCM must encompass the good practices between the countries of origin, countries of destination at the bilateral, regional, and multilateral level. Participation of all stakeholders at all levels is imperative for the success of GCM. We fully endorse that IOM can play a leading role in the success of GCM process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Uruguay is next.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Me uno al resto de las delegaciones en agradecer a México y a los cofacilitadores por todo el trabajo desempeñado hasta el momento. Señor presidente, como país emisor y receptor de migración, el Estado uruguayo ha adherido a la iniciativa de concretar un pacto mundial sobre migraciones en el ámbito de las Naciones Unidas, por lo que celebra el proceso de consultas llevadas a cabo en esta fase y las distintas instancias de discusión e intercambio a las que han sido convocados los Estados miembros. Uruguay es, de hecho, uno de los Estados que ya ha realizado su informe país y ha presentado propuestas concretas para ser incorporadas en el Pacto Global. Uruguay ha ratificado y suscrito los más importantes acuerdos, convenciones y tratados internacionales en materia regulatoria y de protección de los derechos humanos y ha desarrollado un marco normativo nacional basado en el reconocimiento y el pleno respeto de los derechos de las personas migrantes y sus familiares. Uruguay reconoce el derecho a emigrar, regresar y también a permanecer voluntariamente en el país de origen o destino. Los principios que orientan la política migratoria son la igualdad en el trato y el goce de los derechos entre nacionales y extranjeros, la no discriminación, la integración sociocultural, el respeto a la diversidad y la identidad cultural, la igualdad de género, la protección integral de los grupos de migrantes en situación más vulnerable. El Estado uruguayo subraya lo manifestado en la Declaración de Nueva York en cuanto a la necesidad de que los Estados trabajen más conjuntamente, compartiendo responsabilidades de forma más equitativa para encontrar y consensuar respuestas coordinadas y de largo plazo a las oportunidades y desafíos que representan las migraciones internacionales y los grandes desplazamientos. Uruguay asigna una alta importancia al tratamiento del tema en la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas, en tanto ámbito adecuado para la participación de todos los Estados y el planteamiento de sus perspectivas e intereses en condiciones de mayor igualdad. Finalmente, nuestro país, recordando el papel central de la OIM en el apoyo técnico brindado al proceso de consulta nacional realizado en nuestro país, promueve que esa organización pueda desempeñar un alto papel en el proceso de seguimiento de los lineamientos que se puedan derivar del Pacto Global. Señor Presidente, Uruguay está comprometido con el multilateralismo y asigna la mayor prioridad a que nuestros esfuerzos se concreten en un instrumento relevante para mejorar la vida de millones de personas que abandonan sus países cada año. Muchas gracias.
Thank you much. I invite the Global Coalition on Migration to take the floor.
Thank you. On behalf of the members of the Global Coalition on Migration, and after a year of extensive engagement by civil society and particularly migrant-led organizations across the globe in regional civil society consultations, we look forward in the next phase for the spirit of learning and engagement and dialogue with civil society and particularly migrant-led organized forces. We look for ongoing structural empowerment and support for the active, genuine, and multi-sectoral participation of organized migrants, including regional and grassroots networks, migrant worker centers, trade unions, migrant women's organizations, and diaspora. We want formal but also informal opportunities and structures for migrants in our organizations, national human rights institutions, and civil society to participate in the implementation, oversight of the compact, including transparent and accountable monitoring, review, and implementation mechanisms. As many of us go back to the communities that we live in and work in with migrant people every day, migrant women on the front lines of doing domestic work, migrant workers working in the fields for little pay and long hours, migrant families languishing in detention and separated from their loved ones, and as many of you go into negotiations in the coming months, we look to leadership that is not only compelled by the arguments of public pressure that's rooted in fear and xenophobia, that compels a compact to close borders, to push migrants back, for return policies that are often not so voluntary, but we look for leadership that demonstrates courage to devise progressive policies that respect the lives and dignity and human rights of migrant people. And in fact, this is indeed possible by working closely with organized migrant examples, with sectors, with governments at local and national level that have demonstrated policies that exist in many places that protect rights. Policies at the heart of civil society's concerns, particularly for migrant labor rights, migrant women's rights, access to services and firewalls protections for irregular migrants, social protections, access to justice, and due process in procedures and returns. Civil society organizing has always existed and will continue to exist, and particularly by migrant communities. And in this phase of negotiations, we look to ensuring that there is a central role for organized migrants in shaping the compact and implementing rights-based practices after the adoption of the compact.
Thank you very much. I have 7 more speakers on my list: Singapore, Kazakhstan, Republic of Korea, Senegal, Sweden, United Kingdom, and El Salvador. Singapore, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Facilitator, for giving me the floor. Singapore would like to first join our other delegations in thanking Mexico, our host, for hosting this stock-taking meeting. Singapore agrees that the scale, complexity, and impact of the global migration phenomenon warrants international attention and response. Over the last few months and the past few days, we have heard debates and discussions on the pressing issues related to migration. There is a need for international community to pay particular attention to the key drivers of migration and to consider practical approaches to better manage the flow of people across borders and communities. Migrating for work should be a choice. Unfortunately for many, migration has become a matter of necessity rather than a choice. Such cases are not the preferred option, as the journey abroad often involves a great deal of uncertainty and personal sacrifice. The international community needs to work together to invest in sound economic and labor policies that create decent work opportunities for all. Today, close to 40% of Singapore's population are foreigners. Singapore thus has considerable experience in migration, and we value the contributions that legal and documented migrants make in our country. In Singapore, we take a whole-of-government approach to keep Singapore's borders safe and secure so that our citizens, legal migrants, and legitimate travelers can enjoy the safety and security while they are in Singapore. Our immigration and registration laws are thus designed to be effectively administered to facilitate safe, orderly, and legal travel and migration through our borders. Singapore believes that in order to achieve the safe, orderly, and regular movement of people, such movements must be legal. In our view, the GCM that we're working towards should take into account specific national circumstances and aspirations. It is critical that states retain their sovereign right to maintain their inflow of migrants and determine the conditions in which migrants may enter, reside, and take up employment legally. In our view, this is the best way of ensuring that states are in a position to promote and protect the rights of migrants while taking into account the interests of the societies which receive them. Mr. Co-Facilitators, migration is a complex issue which presents both challenges and opportunities. It is thus timely that this important subject is being discussed in such a comprehensive manner. We look forward to committing to engage constructively in the rest of the process towards the adoption of the GCM. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kazakhstan is next. Kazakhstan, you have the floor. I see a microphone, but I don't see a speaker. Maybe we go on to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My delegation would like to take this opportunity to speak about Korea's priorities. Korea upholds the importance of protecting the human rights and the fundamental freedoms of all migrants. We therefore stress the states should implement migration policies and border control measures in conformity with applicable obligation under international law and in compliance with the principle of non-refoulement. My delegation also highlights the importance of better data and evidence, and sufficient disaggregated data not only enhance effectiveness of migration policy, but is conducive to preventing prejudice and xenophobia. We look forward to more cooperation made in this area. I thank you and Mexico.
Thank you very much. Senegal is next.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais m'associer aux remerciements adressés à la représentante du secrétaire général, Madame Louise Arbour, pour ses propos motivants et éclairants. Ensuite, ajouter très brièvement quelques remarques, en commençant par celle-ci. Dès lors que le pacte est un pacte mondial, adopté sous les auspices des Nations Unies, il lui faudrait un mécanisme de suivi et de mise en œuvre universel, eu égard à l'immense espoir suscité par ce pacte et compte tenu de l'implication de tous les États membres de l'ONU. Nous sommes heureux de constater à cet égard qu'une convergence semble se dessiner pour considérer que l'OIM est bien placé pour jouer ce rôle important qu'il assumerait en s'appuyant sur le système des Nations Unies et sur un groupe restreint de structures spécialisées comme le HCR et l'OMS. Mais une telle approche, pour être mieux considérée, devrait trouver certainement à s'améliorer dans les 3 directions suivantes. D'abord, éviter d'alourdir les tâches et responsabilités déjà fort nombreuses reposant sur les épaules de cette organisation importante, eu égard à la transversalité de tout examen des questions liées à la migration. Ensuite, réfléchir à la mise en place d'une structure légère, comme il en existe ailleurs, qui jouerait le rôle d'un secrétariat permanent, appelé à œuvrer étroitement et de façon holistique avec l'OIM et toutes les autres agences et institutions compétentes en vertu de leur domaine d'attribution, y compris le GFMD et les autres mécanismes de suivi appartenant notamment à d'autres cadres comme celui du programme à l'horizon 2030 et de l'agenda 2063. Enfin, mettre sur pied un fonds de soutien et de financement qui apparaît comme une nécessité. Le fonds serait diversement alimenté et principalement par des contributions volontaires des États et de tout organisme concerné, y compris le secteur privé.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
Je ne terminerai pas sans remercier le gouvernement mexicain pour son accueil et sa parfaite organisation de notre rencontre. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Sweden is next. Sweden, you didn't ask for the floor? Can I get microphone for Sweden, please?
Thank you. Let me start by joining others and thank our Mexican host for the hospitality that you have shown us, and also let me thank the panelists and SRSG Arbor for your presentation. Sweden aligns itself with the intervention made by the EU. Sweden would like the GCM to include 3 main components. First, an introductory declaration based on existing principles that promotes existing human rights and gender equality. 2, a platform for action with operational commitments. And 3, a follow-up mechanism with a coordinating role for IOM. B, 3 principles should be on the principles should be based on existing principles and promote existing human rights and gender equality, and could set out the following common objectives. Number 1, protecting the human rights of migrants and providing protection for migrants in vulnerable situations, including in times of crisis. 2, facilitating safe and regular movement of migrant workers while ensuring decent work for migrant workers, in particular migrant women. 3, addressing irregular migration by enhancing national migration management capacity, combating modern slavery, trafficking and smuggling, and ensuring effective returns in dignity and safety. 4, enhancing the development effects of migration and ensuring inclusion of migrants in their host societies. And 5, improving international cooperation and governance of migration. The platform for action needs to have concrete and time-bound operational commitments. The follow-up should include regular mechanisms for review of success and incrementally making new commitments. In improving UN coordination and coherence on migration could be a key deliverable from the GCM. For this, it is crucial that IOM gets a coordinating role in the follow-up to the GCM, respecting others' mandates and mobilizing their comparative advantages in support of member states and migrants. Any other interim coordinating function are likely to delay the maturity of the system as a whole. We should design the future architecture for migration based not on capacities of today, but on a vision of what we want it to be tomorrow. This means we need to build IOM's capacities and expand its coordination function in parallel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. United Kingdom is next.
Muchas gracias. Quisiera agradecer al gobierno mexicano por la organización de esta excelente conferencia. I'd like to align the UK to the statement made by the European Union. I welcome the comments from the panel and the Special Representative of the Secretary-General. In her presentation, the SRSG mentioned 4 areas the Secretary-General's report will focus on. I would like to focus very briefly on 2 of these. Firstly, the SRSG underlined the need for a strong cooperative framework and that the report will be respectful of the different perspectives of states. That is welcome. We leave Puerto Vallarta with a strong sense of cooperation in this hall and are convinced that the different perspectives found here can be accommodated. The SRSG also underlined leadership and the need for a different public discourse about migration. We recognize that and share her concern. It is, though, a complex issue, and we should not underplay the challenge and difficulty in addressing it. We are looking forward to the Secretary-General's report and the co-facilitator's zero draft in January. It will be an interesting month. The debate and contributions this week have been rich and varied. We don't underestimate the challenge of knitting them together and finding comfortable compromises in the zero draft, but we are confident the co-facilitators will manage to do so. Finally, there's been much talk this week about mini-multilateralism. That's an interesting idea, but we still need multi-multilateralism to achieve the Global Compact. So I'd like to underline the commitment of the UK to this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 4 more requests for the floor, then I really have to close the list. I have El Salvador, Colombia, Mexico, and Nigeria. El Salvador, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor cofacilitador. Hemos escuchado con atención la recopilación de los aspectos más importantes que se han mencionado durante estos días de trabajo. Coincidimos que el proceso que hemos iniciado permitirá cambiar la narrativa acerca de la migración, creando una nueva visión donde nos centraremos en el ser humano y sus derechos. En ese sentido, mi delegación desea mencionar lo siguiente. El Pacto Global deberá establecer una serie de principios, compromisos y entendimientos que fortalezcan la cooperación internacional para promover una migración segura, ordenada y regular. Asimismo, deberá ser ambiciosa, de manera que proporcione soluciones integrales, duraderas y sostenibles para todos los involucrados, particularmente que responda de manera efectiva a las necesidades apremiantes de todos los migrantes, sin importar su estatus migratorio. Será necesario fortalecer la gobernanza global y para ello es importante que más estados se sumen a la ratificación de los marcos internacionales existentes en el tema migratorio, como la Convención de los Trabajadores Migrantes. Reforzar la cooperación internacional con el objetivo de fortalecer las capacidades de los estados para adoptar políticas y procedimientos integrales bien planificados de gobernanza migratoria, para promover la existencia de vías regulares como medios para alcanzar una migración segura, ordenada y regular. Para el monitoreo y el seguimiento del pacto, la recolección y análisis de datos será de gran importancia para atender a las necesidades de todos los migrantes sin importar su estatus migratorio. Y en este sentido, la cooperación entre y dentro de las regiones permitirá articular esfuerzos para lograr este fin. Sin duda alguna, la OIM juega un papel clave y central en este proceso para reforzar el mecanismo que se establezca de seguimiento y revisión del pacto. Por último, este esfuerzo no es solo de los estados, sino que requerirá la cooperación y trabajo conjunto de las diferentes partes interesadas, como la sociedad civil, las instituciones nacionales de derechos humanos, los organismos internacionales, la academia, los parlamentos, el sector privado, entre otros. Deseo agradecer al Gobierno de México por recibirnos en esta bella ciudad. Agradecemos la ardua labor de los cofacilitadores México y Suiza. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Colombia is next. Colombia is next, please.
Muchas gracias, señor cofacilitador. En primer lugar, me uno a los agradecimientos a los facilitadores, a la señora Arbour y al Gobierno de México. Intervengo en esta sección de conclusión para señalar 3 aspectos que son fundamentales para mi país en el Pacto Global de Migraciones. En primer lugar, el tema de la regularización como única forma de visibilización de los migrantes. La implementación de una migración ordenada, regular y segura pasa por la facilitación del proceso migratorio. Esto no solamente tiene que ver con la ampliación de las vías regulares para hacerlo, sino con la liberalización de las condiciones de entrada y salida de los ciudadanos. Una efectiva protección de los derechos de los migrantes, sin importar su estatus migratorio, debe tener en cuenta los procesos de regularización. La regularización es el único camino que permite que los migrantes sean visibilizados e impide la creación y repetición de procesos subterráneos de los cuales se lucran las redes del delito transnacional. El Pacto Global puede ser un instrumento que, mediante la cooperación internacional, abra las puertas para nuevos programas de regularización. El segundo aspecto es entonces el de la cooperación internacional, que juega un papel fundamental en la gobernanza de las migraciones, ayudándonos a definir los criterios esenciales que permitan el diseño y la implementación de hojas de ruta para la acogida, protección, promoción e integración de las personas migrantes y sus familias, elementos esenciales en el diseño y formulación de políticas migratorias. Y en tercer lugar, quiero señalar la aspiración que tiene mi país de que encontremos la forma de que el pacto sea de alguna manera vinculante y con un mecanismo de seguimiento en el que será fundamental el papel de la OIM en la asistencia y acompañamiento de la implementación y cumplimiento del pacto. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Mexico is next.
Muchas gracias, señor cofacilitador. Simplemente queremos agradecer a los expertos que nos hicieron unas presentaciones al inicio de esta reunión, señalando las coincidencias y los enormes trabajos y avances que hemos tenido a lo largo de estos últimos días y a lo largo de este proceso. Queremos también agradecer a la señora Luis Arbour por sus comentarios. Creo que ha sido una reunión muy alentadora, donde hemos visto muchas coincidencias, donde hay una gran cantidad de propuestas orientadas a la acción y sobre todo vemos una enorme voluntad de todos los países de avanzar hacia la construcción de este pacto global sobre la base de una dimensión humana, de una responsabilidad compartida, de una cooperación internacional y sin duda de asumir con claridad esta oportunidad única que tenemos de avanzar hacia la construcción de este pacto. Queremos desearle a los cofacilitadores éxito en la elaboración del primer proyecto que se presentará en el proceso que sigue, agradecer a todas las delegaciones los comentarios que han hecho y sobre todo desearles un gran regreso a casa y que este espíritu de Puerto Vallarta nos siga acompañando en el resto de este proceso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you much. Nigeria, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Nigeria notes with satisfaction several recommendations that have been proffered in the last 3 days and thank the co-facilitators for providing needed leadership to push the Global Compact forward. Nigeria, as an origin and destination country, would like to make the following submission on actionable commitments, follow-up, and concrete implementation mechanisms. 1. GCM should stress fundamentally the importance of capacity building for migrants at destination countries. This is in order to identify and build skills, reduce gap, build resilience of migrants in countries of destination. The fact is also linked to creating decent work of migrant in origin, transit, and destination country. 2. The important role of local integration for migrants should be stressed within the compact in order to foster cooperation and confidence building for migrants in destination country as a way of preventing xenophobic and other untoward feelings. 3. Global Compact need effective coordination across national and regional levels in order to incorporate regional and sub-regional initiatives that are peculiar in nature but global in implementation. A notable example here is the Common African Position on Migration, which will be adopted at the summit of the head of state and government in January 2018. 4. Setting of timelines and targets for implementation of some basic recommendations of the Global Compact for member states are important to monitoring compliance and measuring outcome of specific targets inherent in the Compact. 5. Financing is critical to implementation, especially for member states. Global Compact should set parameters for financing through appropriate synergy among international development partners such as World Bank and regional financial institutions such as the African Development Bank in order to create financial lifeline that will be regional in focus but effective in implementation. 6. Global Compact should emphasize strong partnership between national government and relevant international agencies in areas of gathering and strengthening data for migration as a way of enhancing accurate management of migration flows. It is also important that GCM should take proper account of the demographic trends of migration and tailor actionable commitments on specific demographic component of migration as a way of ensuring a holistic approach to solving wide-ranging migration issues. Let me conclude by conveying Nigerian appreciation to the government and peoples of Mexico for their hospitality and support in hosting this conference and helping to generate varied but enriching deliberations towards a global compact. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And the very last speaker is Argentina. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Simplemente para...
Microphone for Argentina, please.
Sí, muchas gracias. Simplemente para agradecer a los organizadores, a los cofacilitadores por la recepción y simplemente también para acompañar a lo que han dicho los otros delegados, lo que ha dicho, bueno, pero en su momento Chile en cuanto a que le va a competir a la OIM un rol activo en el mecanismo de seguimiento. Simplemente para eso. Muchas gracias.
Thank you much. Dear colleagues, this concludes the concluding segment of this meeting. Thank you very much again for your contributions, for your patience, for your perseverance. Many thanks to the panel experts and to the Special Representative of the Secretary General for her outlook on the forthcoming report. And it is my pleasure now. Please don't leave the room. We're going right into the closing ceremony. It is my privilege and pleasure to ask the President of the General Assembly to join us on the podium, as well as the representative of the Mexican government, and we're going to write on. Please don't leave. Excellencies, dear colleagues, this is the final segment of our preparatory meeting, and I have the privilege and honor to invite His Excellency Miroslav Lajčák, the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, to address the meeting. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. President.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Special Representative Arbour, esteemed co-facilitators, dear colleagues, I am very glad to be here in this beautiful city of Puerto Vallarta, and I want to express my thanks to the government and people of Mexico for welcoming us all so warmly. The New York Declaration was a major achievement. That's because we did something which had not been done before. For the first time, we committed to global cooperation on migration, and we committed to doing so under one global compact. However, as significant as this commitment was, it was all we had. We didn't know how it would all happen. We didn't know exactly when it would happen, and we didn't know what it would entail. Since the adoption of the declaration in 2016, we have achieved a lot. We have set timelines. We have decided on clear modalities. Through our discussions, we have identified broad building blocks for an eventual compact. We have begun to see results at the national and regional levels. And what's even more important, we have organized and participated in what I believe to be the most comprehensive and inclusive international discussions on migration in history. The time here in Puerto Vallarta has been very important for the process. The collective efforts of all of you here, ably led by the co-facilitators, has created a positive dynamic for the way forward. As we come to the end of these discussions, I want to do three things. One, reflect on the knowledge and insight we have gained. Two, point out to the areas of convergence that have emerged. And three, look to the negotiations ahead. So first, reflection. Simply put, we know more about international migration now than we did when we started. A lot more, on many different fronts. We know more about the numbers. Still not enough, because we need significant improvements to data collections. However, the information we do have gives us a much more accurate idea of the scale, trends, and demographics of international migration. For example, we know that less than 5% of the world's population is moving across borders. We know that more and more women migrate, and that the average age of an international migrant is 39. We know that more people move among countries in the global south than to destinations in the global north. These are not always the facts and figures represented in our newspapers or on social media, and I'm glad that many of you stressed them again during this meeting. Secondly, we know more about the practice. Our discussions have allowed us to identify some best practices from our national responses to international migration so far. For example, we heard from Thailand that it has developed a scheme to promote the health of both documented and undocumented migrants, as well as their dependents. Ecuador detailed its efforts to provide migrants with identity cards, ensuring their access to health and education services, as well as to justice. We now know that countries like Sierra Leone and South Africa support migrants to obtain passports and other identity documents, which can expedite their eventual return home. Furthermore, we know more about the impact. That's because this process has allowed us to gain new and diverse perspectives. Over the past month, we have heard from a wide range of actors. We have heard from community activists who have mobilized against hate speech and helped to promote integration. We have heard from police officers who have been the first responders in cases of human trafficking. And we have heard from civil society actors who have grappled to respond to extensive needs with scarce resources. I think it's safe to say that we have all gained knowledge and insight which we may not have had when we started last year. In this way, we can now better understand what migration means for those on the front lines. And I'm confident that these perspectives will enrich both our negotiations and the compact that will come out of them. Excellencies, our learning has continued here in Mexico. You have come here with concrete recommendations and proposals. The Idea Labs, in particular, have produced important food for thought. And now, as we come to the end of this meeting, and indeed the end of this part of the process, it's time to take stock of our discussions so far. So I want to use my second point to give you my own stocktake. And I want to start by being frank. There are issues we continue to disagree on. However, I've also identified strong common positions, and I will highlight some of them. The first is that we cannot keep going as we are. Throughout all the discussions I and my team have attended, I have not heard a single voice arguing that our current response to international migration is sustainable. In fact, what I have heard instead is a resounding rejection of business as usual. The second is that migration is a global phenomenon. Our discussions have highlighted the international nature of migration. This has led many of you to underline the need for an international response. And this has led many of you to reaffirm that the United Nations is the best, and in fact, the only forum in which this response can be formulated. The third is that we need to have a credible follow-up mechanism. This is essential for implementing what we agree upon. The next area of convergence I want to highlight is state sovereignty. Member states will determine their own migration policies. The New York Declaration reiterated this. You reiterated this. So it's something we can all continue to agree upon, and it will certainly be confirmed in the Compact. The final area of convergence I want to mention is also the most important, and that's because it relates to people. Every single one of you in some way talked about people. You emphasized that all people are born with fundamental rights and dignity. It is people who will negotiate the Global Compact. It is people who will implement it. And it is people who will be affected by it. I want to thank all of you who have contributed so far. The member states, civil society, academia, the private sector, regional organizations, and the United Nations entities and agencies. Each of you has brought unique perspectives, ideas, and experiences to the table. Moving now to my third point, I want to ask you all to look ahead. Some tough negotiations await us in the new year. Many of you in this room will be driving them, and we should not underestimate the work that remains to be done. Today I want to highlight three main elements which I hope we will see throughout our negotiations in 2018. First, real exchange and real dialogue. We need to hear from all member states, from all regions. Negotiation does not come from reading statements which have been prepared before all views were expressed. It does not come from sticking to our individual monologues. If we want a real negotiation, we need to talk, we need to listen, and we need to engage in a real dialogue. Second, compromise. This is a necessary element of every negotiations. We don't know what the next stage of the process has in store. What we do know for certain, however, is that compromise will be essential. Even this three-day meeting has already displayed a diversity of positions. It would not be possible to fit them all in one document. It doesn't matter how highly we value our priorities or how right we think we are. If we want to reach an agreement, we will all have to come closer to the middle. And finally, the third element that will be crucial to our upcoming negotiations is a commitment to multilateralism. From time to time, we must remind ourselves of what multilateralism represents. And one of those times is today. Multilateralism is the belief that we are stronger together than apart. It is the rejection of a system based solely on power and might. It is the willingness to invite all positions and views, despite the time and efforts this demands. It is the commitment to remain engaged, even when we don't all agree. And it is the conviction that the goals and principles outlined in the United Nations Charter are as relevant today as they were in the aftermath of the World War II. Excellencies, dear colleagues, very soon we will begin to negotiate the world's first global compact on migration. Make no mistake about it. This will be a test. It will be a test of our diplomatic and negotiating skills. It will be a test of the United Nations capacity to respond to the most pressing of global issues. And in the words of Pope Francis, it will be a test of our humanity. Will our successors read about our achievements or merely our attempts? Will our experience serve as a best practice or as a warning? Will we go down in history as diplomats who prioritized people or our own agenda? And will our work be deemed to have strengthened or undercut the role for the United Nations in responding to the phenomenon of international migration. So I'm calling on all of you today, whether you are based in capital, Geneva or New York, whether you work for a big or small delegations, whether you represent a country of origin, transit or destination, and whether this process is deemed as a priority or not by your capitals. Please engage. Please negotiate. Please compromise. As with all other tests, if we don't try, we are certain to fail. And as with all other tests, history will be our most critical judge. Please work to be on the right side of history. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thanks for your encouraging words. Thanks for being here today with us, making the way to Mexico, and thanks for your continuous engagement, encouragement, and support. We will need it over the next months to come, and I know we'll have it, and we're really grateful for that. It's now my true privilege and pleasure to invite Ms. Louise Arbour in her capacity as Secretary General of the Intergovernmental Conference to address the colleagues.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the co-facilitators of this intergovernmental process, Ambassadors Gomez Gamacho and Lauber, for planning, organizing, and presiding over this very successful meeting, which has brought us together and much closer to defining the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. It has been 3 days of extraordinary, intense stock-taking. I would also like to thank the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Miroslav Lajčák, for his very firm and long-standing commitment to this issue of global migration. Special thanks also go to the Government of Mexico and the State of Jalisco for hosting us in such an excellent and inspiring way in the last few days, which I'm sure has contributed to the very positive outcome of this meeting. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you here, participants, member states, and multi-stakeholders for your active and constructive contributions to what has been, I think, truly a very encouraging set of deliberations. The Mexican hospitality and sunshine have provided us with the required energy to go back to New York and undertake now the critical part of our collective mandate. That is to design and to agree upon a global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. Like all of you, I'm very conscious that this is no small task. But before we get immersed in the details of content, language, trade-offs, and strategies, I think we should take this opportunity to remind ourselves of the true significance of what we have embarked upon together. Like other species, humans are territorial. We have inherited from our ancestors a geographic allocation of our respective place on this planet. This has brought us order and security, but also inequities, constraints, and conflict. We have an opportunity today to agree on ways of enhancing our collective security by addressing some of these inequities. Even though it has been asserted time and again throughout this process that the Global Compact is not meant to be a legally binding document, I believe that the objectives of enhancing safe and orderly migration, this objective is very much rooted in the rule of law. I don't mean here law in the sense of a convention or a treaty or even domestic legislation. I mean it in a much broader sense, as a fair and orderly organization of our interactions with each other as individuals and as groups of individuals. In my view, this has never been better expressed than by French cleric Lacordaire, who said, and I roughly quote, "Between the rich and the poor, between the master and the servant, Between the strong and the weak, it is freedom that oppresses and the law that sets free. The objective of putting in place enhanced international cooperation on the many aspects of migration reflects exactly this vision of the rule of law. We are set to improve the lives of millions of migrant workers and their contribution to our communities, to reduce recourse to dangerous channels of migration, and to maximize the convergence of our values with our interests. When we convene under the auspices of the United Nations, we engage in the pursuit of a truly global public interest. In doing so, there is no need to sacrifice national interests and ambitions, quite the opposite. In facilitating the orderly growth of a well-managed international labor market, privileging legal routes and the fair treatment of migrants, we will reduce the insecurity inherent in disorder and illegality. We have an opportunity today to deal with one of the many challenges posed by the growing number of us occupying this planet. We will not solve every problem. Some of the most compelling arguments for action will be met by skepticism, ignorance, arrogance, selfishness, deep-rooted prejudice, and even hatred. But the case for safe, orderly, and regular migration is a compelling one, and the means of improving it have become increasingly clear in the course of our consultations in the last few months. Most of our fellow citizens are open-minded and ready to be convinced by rational discourse about the benefit of well-managed migration. Your leadership has never been more important. The steps we are poised to take will not resolve everything, but they will make a lot of things better. I look forward to working closely with you in the months ahead, and I thank you for your attention and wish you safe travels back home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, for these words, and also at this point, thank you very much for the excellent cooperation we had between the teams of the co-facilitators and your own, and the fantastic support we've always had from your side. I now have the pleasure to ask the representative of the government of Mexico to address the meeting. It is a very big pleasure for me because it's Dr. Erasmo Lara, a longtime colleague and friend of mine, who is the Director General for Human Rights and Democracy. Erasmo, you have the floor. Thanks for being here.
Muchas gracias. Señor Miroslav Lajčák, presidente de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas, señora Louise Arbour, secretaria general de la Conferencia Intergubernamental sobre Migración Internacional, señores cofacilitadores, embajadores Jürg Lauber y Juan José Gómez Camacho, apreciados colegas, señoras y señores. Quiero iniciar esta breve intervención reiterando nuestro agradecimiento una vez más al gobierno de Jalisco y en particular a su gobernador Aristóteles Sandoval y a las autoridades de la ciudad de Puerto Vallarta y de este centro de convenciones por haber hospedado la reunión preparatoria que hoy concluye. No hay duda que ha sido una reunión muy exitosa y que nos ha permitido hacer un balance completo y participativo del proceso hasta ahora, que nos permitirá arribar al eventual pacto mundial para una migración segura, ordenada y regular el año entrante. Esta reunión concluye un importante periodo de intercambio, reflexión y fortalecimiento de la confianza, además que deja claro que es a través del trabajo multilateral dentro de Naciones Unidas que juntos podemos identificar desafíos y soluciones a la compleja realidad migratoria mundial. Es así que tenemos hoy una visión completa y sofisticada de la migración y de las oportunidades que representa para los estados, para las personas y para el desarrollo. Tenemos claro el papel central de la persona migrante, el imperativo de la promoción y protección de los derechos humanos y el combate a la discriminación y la xenofobia, el papel preeminente que la perspectiva de género debe tener y la necesidad de atacar las condiciones de vulnerabilidad y de empoderar a las personas migrantes. Además, es evidente la oportunidad que el proceso nos da para sacar el mejor provecho de los esquemas de migración circular laboral, reconocer y potenciar habilidades, trabajar en la integración y reintegración y asegurar que la migración sea una opción, pero también un motor para el desarrollo y el bienestar. En síntesis, los trabajos de estos 3 días ilustran que vamos en la dirección correcta, que es posible tener, como lo dicen los cofacilitadores, una visión de 360 grados y que a través del diálogo abierto, constructivo y participativo haremos de nuestro Pacto Mundial una herramienta verdaderamente transformadora dentro de las Naciones Unidas para no dejar a nadie atrás. México apuesta por el multilateralismo y por trabajar para encontrar soluciones globales para desafíos globales. Como lo ilustran los debates de estos 3 días y el ambiente y espíritu colaborativo, la Organización de las Naciones Unidas es el espacio idóneo para reflexionar, discutir y cooperar de manera estrecha para atender nuestras responsabilidades y desafíos comunes. Para concluir, quiero extender un amplio reconocimiento al trabajo realizado por los cofacilitadores y sus equipos, quienes diseñaron un esquema de trabajo que facilitó la reflexión y la identificación de aportaciones concisas y propositivas y que podrán dar forma al eventual Pacto Mundial. Reconocemos también el liderazgo de la señora Louise Arbour, quien ha llevado y alimentado este proceso con argumentos contundentes, con hechos y con gran claridad y visión. Agradecemos también la importante presencia del presidente de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas, lo que da cuenta de la relevancia del tema en la agenda de la organización. Gracias también por la participación de todos los representantes de sociedad civil, de los migrantes, de los organismos internacionales y de todos quienes han podido compartir sus visiones y experiencias. Por último, un reconocimiento a todos quienes trabajaron para hacer posible esta reunión, funcionarios de Naciones Unidas, oficiales de sala e intérpretes, pero también a los enlaces y a los estudiantes voluntarios de distintas universidades mexicanas, así como al personal de la Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores de México. Sin todos ellos, esta reunión no habría sido el éxito que hoy es. Para concluir, quisiera reiterarles nuestro deseo de que tengan todos ustedes un regreso ordenado, seguro y regular a sus lugares de origen y espero que tengan muy felices fiestas a fin de año. Mucho éxito para 2018 y recordemos siempre el espíritu de Puerto Vallarta. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Erasmo, and through you, please, to the Mexican authorities, local and federal, many thanks from the co-facilitators, and also, again, many thanks to the people who came here from New York, the conference services, translators, etc. Before I hand over to the co-facilitator, to Ambassador Gomez Camacho, for some concluding remarks on behalf of both co-facilitators, a few details about the next steps ahead. Obviously, we're not done here. The next step is you will receive a chair's text summarizing these 3 days we spent together here in the meeting room. It should be out in time for you to be busy over Christmas, so you're not getting too bored over the holidays. Then, of course, the zero draft is next after that, based on the chair's text of this stock-taking meeting, but also based on the forthcoming report from the Secretary General. That was already, we had a peek by the Special Representative this afternoon. But also during this time, keep sending in your contributions. Keep sending us your index cards and keep sending us your emails with your concrete, specific contributions on what you would like to see in the text. The next time we meet is going to be in New York when we will talk about the zero draft. I have the dates now. I will not read out all of these dates. You will find them on the website. You will receive them by emails. But the first meeting will be in February on 20, 22nd and 23rd. This will be the first meeting in New York when we're going to talk. Actually, when we go into the real stuff, when we go to talk about the draft. 21st of February is going to be the PGA hearing with stakeholders. So 20, 22 and 23rd are our dates in New York. With this, from my side, thank you very much, and I hand over to Ambassador Gomez Camacho for some concluding remarks.
Gracias, Jörg. Thank you so much. Many of you told us throughout these 3 days that Jörg and I looked too relaxed. And yes, we were very relaxed. Not only because we were not us the ones working, you were the ones working and our teams were working very hard, but also because truly we can see that we are now where we thought we should be in order for us to start the third phase, which is the actual negotiation and construction of the Global Compact. And we are there, or we are here, for very good reasons that we can see. Second, and I will explain you a little bit why, but second, many of you also seem not to be totally convinced when we told you that we don't have a hidden draft in a drawer somewhere in our offices. We don't. We have not started to put or to write a single word of the zero draft. As we promised, as we said, we would start, now we will start drafting or writing the zero draft based on phase 1 and phase 2 Puerto Vallarta. Third, we hear you. We have heard you loud and clear. We have paid careful attention to everything you said. We have paid careful attention to everything you did not say. And we have understood all the nuances expressed throughout all these months. It is absolutely remarkable to see how much how much you all have evolved in your thinking, in your positioning, and in your understanding of the phenomenon. And as we say, or we both of us are completely convinced, and we always say it privately, this is not about common views. This is about common purpose, which is not the same thing. And we believe, we can see it, we can feel it in the room. We are reaching this level of common purpose rather than common views. Then the rest we will put it together and it's going to be very easy. We are reaching this common purpose. And for that it's interesting too that we heard in the room, publicly and privately, as a message to the co-facilitators, constant message to the co-facilitators, please be balanced. And we don't think it's about balancing. And please don't be scared. This is not about balancing, because this is about common purpose. You balance opposing interests. You balance opposing things, opposing realities, opposing views. And this exercise we are doing, this huge challenge that we have, is not about that. And it's not about that because if there's anything we have learned, is that we all are everything in the migration phenomenon. This is not anymore, and this is not rhetorical, this is statistical. This is not anymore about countries of origin versus countries of destination. Because again, if anything we have learned is that migration moves everywhere, goes through everywhere. South, north, yes, but south, south, and very much so north, north. So we all are everything. So we all share the interest and the views of countries of origin. We all share the views and interests of countries of transit, and we all share the views and thoughts of countries and interests of countries of destination. So again, for us, it's not about balancing. It's rather about putting the puzzle together, to put the pieces in the right place. So I come back to my first point. Are we relaxed? Very much relaxed. Because truly, if you paid attention to what you have said, you will also be relaxed, or much more relaxed than you still seem to be. Something we have learned ourselves in the process, and we have said it and shared it with you in different phases and parts of these negotiations and conversations, etc., is that it's very difficult to say something different if we use the same words. And we all are too conditioned to certain words, we are too conditioned to certain meanings, and we are too conditioned to hear certain things. And since we use the same terminology all the time, even if you all have been saying different things, we were paying attention. You all were saying different things. It was difficult to catch that you were saying different things because of the words, because the words we use, the terminology we use, the phraseology we use, both in the UN and in this issue of migration, is already too loaded. Is too heavy. Every word we use in the migration world carries a huge baggage, and mostly not a positive baggage. But you are saying different things already. So one of the things we will do, or try to do, is to start helping or working together in refreshing the terminology, refreshing the words, so we can start afresh. And we can start understanding each other, or catching, or really getting the real meaning of what each of you is trying to say. But I can assure you, we can assure you, the conversation today, compared to the conversation we had when we started, is 180 degrees different, and for the good and for the better. Bill Swing, our good friend Bill Swing, said yesterday or on Monday something very interesting, which was very true. Sometimes we need to make, or to think, or to make the reflection of things much more complex before they become more simple. And it's totally true. And again, I can tell you, we can feel it, we really believed it. It's not an exaggeration, and it's not rhetorical. And it's very honest what we are saying. Things are starting to look more simple. And that makes us extremely happy, because that's exactly what we needed. It seems that we are getting to where we need. So I conclude by telling you again that as co-facilitators, we remain true to our commitment to you member states, our commitment to the President of the General Assembly to make of this a success, to lead and to guide this process based on what you member states want, and have no doubt that we will achieve what we are supposed to achieve, which is a global compact that, through its implementation, by being embraced committedly by all of you, and that you will embrace it because you believed in it, because you will see yourselves reflected in it, we will make migration exactly what it should be: safer, orderly, and regular. Thank you so much from both of us. Thank you so much as Mexican for having accepted to come to this modestly beautiful place. Thank you so much, and I also wish you a safe return back home. To those of you that will see each other in New York tomorrow, Friday, and those that are going back to their capital, to your capitals or other capitals, please have a safe trip and enjoy the rest of your stay in Puerto Vallarta as much as you can. Thank you so much, and thanks so much, Mr. President. Luis, thank you so much, Jörg, and the Secretariat and everybody. Thank you so much.
Good job. Well done. Thank you so much. Good. I'm very happy.
Excellent, excellent. Good, cheers.
Yes.
Está conectado.